right, Nigeria's Monetary Policy Committee raised its benchmark interest rate for a second meeting in a row to 14% from 13%. This increase follows the last meeting in May, where the rate was increased from 11.5% to 13%. Inflationary concerns were listed as the main reason for the move. Now, joining us to discuss the highlights and the major points from the CBN monetary policy meeting is a Rice business analyst, Rotus Odirri. Rotus, I want to say thank you very much for joining us here on Newsday. And
good to be with you, Aaron.
Yes.
And Hawa.
Good to have you.
Yeah.
So, can you break down for us exactly what the CBN governor told us?
Yeah, so he basically said that inflationary concerns, I think he said 6 members of the Monetary Policy Committee voted to increase the rates by 100 basis points. Then you had, I think, 3 members or so voted for it to be raised by 150 basis points. So cumulatively, basically majority ruled. Majority of the Monetary Policy Committee members voted that the rates should rise. And this is cumulatively now, if you're going back to the last meeting in May, where it was increased by 150 basis points, that's now a 250 basis point increase from the last meeting to now. So what's happening? What is happening is that inflation is rising. If you listen to the language of the central bank governor in this press conference, he talked about Ghana's raised their rates 3 times, South Africa this, Egypt that, the United States, the United Kingdom. There are global inflationary concerns around the world. And so what you do as a nation is that you have to worry about attracting capital into your country. When you raise your interest rates, you are raising not just borrowing costs. Borrowing costs are one angle of it, but the other is the attractiveness of your securities. So the United States has been raising its benchmark interest rate. It makes the securities, that is the investment securities, where you put money into a security and you get your return. That becomes more attractive. So when you raise your interest rates, you make your securities more attractive, you attract capital to those securities, and that increases demand in your currency and increases. That's theoretical. Right. Nigeria, though, we are facing a lot of issues where, in fact, capital has actually left this country and gone to other climes. And then the inflationary pressures, there's also what's called the real rate of return, right? Where you subtract an investment return from the interest rate. So, for example, if your savings account is yielding, what are savings accounts doing now? 2%? You take 2% minus 14%, which is the MPR. You have a negative real return of 12%, right? So that's also part of this bag to where you raise rates. Ghana is doing the same thing to try to attract capital, and then try to also stave off inflation. But we are behind the 8 ball because inflation is at the latest numbers, and I think we'll put those numbers up, right? Is at 18.6%, and you're at 14. So you're behind with respect to trying to get these rates to meet up with inflation. So inflationary concerns are the reason why. Okay, so those are the figures. Now these are old figures. That's 17.1. That's for May. For June, the new figure is 18.6%, and food inflation is 20%. So that's pretty much what has informed the decision of the MPC. But again, Nigeria has, and the central bank governor mentioned this. What he said, I think he said legacy infrastructure challenges when it comes to why we're seeing inflation. So think about how the insecurity issues that are in fact impacting farmers on in farms. They can't get their products to the markets. You think about the roads, the bad roads, power issues. All these other constraints are impacting the inflationary pressures that we're seeing in the country. So, as far as the impact, I mean, even the last rate hike of 13.5%, you haven't really seen the impact of that yet. So, and then this is also very key. When you raise your benchmark interest rate, this is the rate at which the central bank is giving loans to other commercial banks, and then they in turn now loan to you and I. When you raise your benchmark interest rate, you are raising the cost of borrowing. And when you raise the cost of borrowing, you are pretty much constricting aggregate demand, which, as you see in the United States, can possibly lead to a slowdown. But for us, we've had 6 consecutive quarters now of GDP growth. The economy is gradually growing. So there is that worry, but maybe it's not as widespread as we think.
All right, not as widespread as you think. If we can actually just move it on, and now looking at the grander scheme of things, let's actually this led into some of the things I said. Can you explain how inflation drove this particular decision?
Yeah, so that's what I just said. I mean, pretty much as far as inflation drove this decision, because you are seeing you're seeing the increase, the impact of inflation on returns, the impact on the disposable income and what it's doing to the economy is essentially the reason why a number of central banks around the world have been raising rates, to try to stave off the impact of inflation. But this is the problem. When you express language that you are chasing inflation, you are now in that trap to where if inflation continues to rise, you now have to react and raise your benchmark rate. So they finally, after keeping rates at 11.5 for quite a while, at the last meeting in May, they said, look, inflation is rising and we have to raise the rates. That's what they did in Ghana. That's what they did. That's what they're doing in the United States. So the trap you fall into is that if after you've expressed that language and put it out for the markets to interpret that you are chasing inflation, if inflation continues to rise, then it is expected that you will continue to raise it. And in fact, I kind of talked out of both sides of my mouth when I was anticipating this decision. At first, I said that they were going to hold. They would not change the rate because you still had to allow the impact of the last rate hike to seep into the economy, right? Now, I did say though that if they did raise the rate, then it would be 100 basis points. So I kind of just made an informed guess. It was kind of a half guess. I would go, 100 or 150. So that was essentially what I thought that they would do. But the key thing here to remember is that once you've expressed this language, if we see inflation rise again from 18.6 to, 19%, 19.5, what now happens at the next Monetary Policy Committee meeting? Will they hike the rate again? It gets to a point where you raise borrowing costs so high that you essentially just plunge the economy into a series of issues because costs are so high to borrow. Think about how much it costs to get a loan from a bank. So, there's a whole number of factors there to consider as to whether or not this is enough.
Well, Rotus, I wanted to ask you if there's any good news, but...
Well, okay, so if you think, there were some good takeaways from the press conference in that he talked about the support that the central bank has essentially put forward to the economy. I think I've scribbled so many things down. 681 billion naira to a number of projects, 26 of them in manufacturing, 17 of them in agriculture, some in services. He talked about healthcare. Look at Vice President Osibanjo getting... we can. So that's the good news.
He happened on that and said how much the facilities they've given to
healthcare
is actually reaping dividends.
It is.
Talk to us about that.
Yeah. So he mentioned 113 billion naira for the healthcare projects, and I think people on the morning show.
Is that even enough in the first place?
No, it is not enough. But look, this is the thing. You see, this is the reason why they say the central bank is being overstretched. There's something called ways and means, which is money that is being lent from the central bank to the federal government. Your ways and means, I believe the cap is not supposed to be more than 5% of the prior year's government revenues. We've exceeded that cap. And so the narrative is that the central bank is so overstretched. They're giving money to agriculture. They're giving money to manufacturing. They're giving money to the power sector. They're giving money to healthcare. So that's what now informs your question as to whether or not the money that they're giving out is enough. It's not enough, but then they can only give as much as they can because there's so many other sectors that they have to support. So it's good. I didn't even know that Duchess was owned by Reddington. He just revealed that. So that's essentially, they've been trying to, and that was part of a narrative where we were saying that he was talking about the facilities they've taken to try to support their network of healthcare services. And I think that Vice President Osibanjo patronizing an indigenous company in healthcare for his surgery is incredibly helpful it's huge. He didn't travel out of the country, and then so now when you now find out that the Central Bank of Nigeria has played a role in providing, Central Bank Governor Mefele talked about the lack. I think he said there was only one MRI center or so.
There used to be one MRI center.
Right. So you connect the dots and you see that from the development finance assistance that the central bank is giving to the different healthcare sectors. You now say, okay, to different sectors of the economy. You now key into healthcare. The vice president of the country had this procedure done here and it was safe and it was good. That's some good news out of all of this, I think.
Can't pay for that kind of PR.
Cannot. You absolutely cannot. Absolutely.
We know what's going on in the world, the Russia-Ukraine crisis. It's getting blamed for everything. Can you tell us what the impact is and how he discussed it?
So I believe the EU, and I'll tie this to Nigeria, the EU is trying to get a deal done with Ukraine's wheat exports, I think, from their Black Sea ports. Okay. Russia is blocking that, obviously, right? So, in fact, Zelensky, I think, came out either this morning or so saying that he doubts whether those exports will make it out. Egypt is the biggest importer of wheat on the African continent. Nigeria also brings in wheat and so on. So if you think about the impact of the restriction on supply chains and getting important commodities like food and so on to other countries that are import dependent, and a shortage of that, well, that's going to drive the price up, because if you reduce the supply of these commodities that are coming in, the little that's left, the price is going to go up. And we're seeing that. Look at food inflation. Food inflation in Nigeria is 20%. I think that's an 18-month high. So and then wages aren't moving up. Look at what's happening with fuel. Look at what's happening with cost of transportation. The average Nigerian spends majority of their income not only on food, but also on transportation. Those are the two big twin dragons, if you like. So when you have a shortage of these commodities coming into the country because of a war, and prices are going up, you are squeezing the average Nigerian on the street whose income is not rising to meet up with inflation and can't afford to get these items. So that's what that role is, what the war is playing. But we cannot attribute the entire inflationary pressure that Nigeria is facing to the war. As the central bank governor said, there are legacy issues that existed before that war began and are still prevalent now. But now they've been amplified because you got COVID and then lockdowns, and then you got the war, and all this stuff being put together makes it very challenging for us.
All right, you're talking about some legacy issues. Let's just try to digress a little bit.
Of course, yeah.
Let's talk about the plight of aero contractors.
Wow. Aero contractors made an announcement yesterday that they were shutting down their services for now. Yeah. And the reason why they're shutting down their services is because of maintenance issues.
Probably 20th.
Right, 20th, sorry, excuse me, thank you. As of tomorrow, the 20th is when they officially, so the announcement was made yesterday. So they said in the release that too many of their planes are under maintenance right now, and so they don't have enough of those planes to be able to supply, to carry out passenger, travel. Now, maintenance of planes is done overseas, and it costs. It's in dollars, right? And if you think about where the dollar is now on the parallel market, which is it's at what, 620? Yeah, so right, and the official rate is about 420. So if you are in this business and that's the foreign exchange challenge. And by the way, I didn't say this earlier. When we look at inflation in Nigeria and the impact, there is a pass-through effect. There's a foreign exchange pass-through effect. So that's also an impact as well. And that is a real constraint for a number of companies in this country because they can't get access to it. So one, foreign exchange isn't readily available. Two, it's expensive. Three, one of the biggest issues that aviation firms in Nigeria are facing, airlines, is the cost of Jet A1 fuel. What is it now? 700, almost 800. So the costs have risen. They are not able to raise prices, that is ticket prices for your average flight, to meet up with those costs, and that's why they're getting squeezed. And they threatened this well, not threatened, they warned.
They've been talking about it for months.
Yeah, the airline operators of Nigeria said that, listen, at some point, we're going to start shutting down. We talked about this one. There was a tweet from even Azman Air. There are people who were complaining about the fact that they spent 12 hours at the airport and couldn't get home. And Azman put out their tweet and saying, we're sorry, but the scarcity of fuel and the expense of fuel is not allowing us to be able to service as many flights as we like. So prices have to go up. But the issue is, if you book a flight now, it's about 55,000, 60,000 naira. That's so it used to be 50,000, now it's 55, maybe 75. That's about what, a 30, 40, 50% increase. When fuel has gone up by 300-400%, you have to be seeing, you got to see like 150,000, 250,000 naira ticket to compensate for that. How many people can afford that? That is the challenge.
This is actually the
right. So that's the tweet. So the lady, her name was Hadiza. She complained and said, we totally understand your plight, but the aviation fuel scarcity is eating deep into the airline business in Nigeria. Our best efforts is in play to mitigate the effect of these challenges on our passengers. Kindly accept our apology. So kudos to them for being honest and being transparent and just telling people. And I think they put out a press release back in May. There was some notice I saw somewhere. I can't remember where I saw it. But so they said this is what's going on, and
it's
so
that chasing that you were talking about again.
Yeah, it does,
So, but I know you've said that the CBN is very stretched.
Yeah.
But they're like the genie. What kind
the genie?
that do grand wishes?
I get where you're going. So I had Alan Onyema, who is the CEO of Air Peace, on Global Business Report about a year ago when the pandemic was really impacting aviation. And I asked him about the bailout. 4 billion naira was what was given. That was what the federal government had. 4 billion naira, he said, can't even buy a turbine engine for one plane. But they said that essentially the money, they appreciated what the government could do, and they used that to maybe pay salaries and so on and so forth. So if you think about, I think the United States has given the aviation industry, I think about $25–30 billion. That's almost as much as our entire budget as a country, just them giving that to one sector. But you can't really compare the two because we are fiscally strained. Look at what's happening with oil theft. You know?
Just hold on, listen to you.
Okay.
The truth is that no amount of money given to you at this period will be enough. And nobody has bottomless, resources.
Yeah.
So the thing is, yes, a lot of people said the money was too small. Yes, it's too small because one spare part, one of your engines could gulp the entire 4 billion. One engine is even more than 4 billion. The 4 billion was given to all of us to share. The government was only trying to help us, maybe to see how that could help us, even if it means paying 1 or 2 salaries or that kind of thing.
Yeah. So I mean, there you are, right? It's Nigeria's our main source of income, which is oil. Look at where oil prices are. We should be making so much money from that right now. But unfortunately, oil theft, which has been called a mafia organization, has just unfortunately constrained how much money we earn. So if you don't earn as much money, you can't really help out sectors, and that's where we are.
All right, so Rotus, what does this mean for the average Nigerian on the streets?
Oh my goodness! If you link everything together, going back to the MPR rates being raised, if you have a lending facility from your bank, and they mostly use floating rates, which means you get a letter saying that due to the prevailing economic circumstances, the rate on your facility loan is going up. So the average Nigerian, if you have a loan and you expect your cost of borrowing to go up. So if you're servicing a loan right now, whether you're a business or an individual, your cost of borrowing is going to go up. So if you're not making as much money, you now have to pay more to service that loan, which means you have less to buy other things that you'd use and so on and so forth. On the aviation thing, it is government's responsibility to make sure that we are a secure and safe nation. I don't know how many people want to now travel by road if the planes are not available. The roads are not safe. The roads are not good. So it's pretty tight. We have to buckle up.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Scary stuff. That was actually scary stuff.
It's tough, but it is what it is. We're doing what we can. Hopefully this war ends and then we can get, that oil theft is reduced and things get better.
All right.
Well, on that note, thank you so much, Rotus, for always coming in to put into layman's terms what the finance world is talking about.
Appreciate it.
Time out.